Guys, someone sent me a text asking how they could download a video I sent them when their computer was out of space. So my response back was, you just had to clear out some space on the computer. So I'm on fire, one could say. So I think with that in mind, I think we're going to have a good episode. And this is, for those that are new here, this is my podcast. I call it It's All Good Podcast. I'm probably going to change the name of it soon. But this is episode number 28, and on this podcast, I normally have creative people on here that talk about their experiences with what their creative outlet is and talk about how they got there. So this one is going to be me talking about my experience with the show Shameless and how I worked on it, because this is something that comes up a lot in conversation, and I have a really bad habit of kind of like not taking full credit for something that's like pretty cool. Like I'd never look back on like working in that being like, oh wow, I worked on Shameless. Like I'm just like, oh, something else I did. And I kind of like have a habit of doing that with stuff until I start telling people about it, and I realize that people react a lot different and are like kind of amazed by it. So with that in mind, it kind of was like, why not just make a podcast talking about it? And I never really had a space to do so. So I guess it's the first time I've had a space to talk about it. So, and I also want to preface this too before it all starts is like, this is not me talking about it like I'm some sort of like director on the show or some sort of like camera guy on the show or anything. It's kind of funny. There's been some people that have thought I've been the camera guy, and it's kind of an honor to like hear that, honestly. But I would make a lot bigger deal of it if I was in that position. But it's nice that there's people out there that think that. But anyway, I was a PA on the show, and I'll get more into the specifics as it goes on. But basically, I'm going to start from scratch because a lot of people always are asking, like, how did you get on there? What were the series of events? And I think for me, it was a lot different than most people. But I think that's a very, like, viable way to like get on the show or get on like other shows, for example, because I think that show's over with now if I'm not mistaken. So I'm gonna kind of run you through like some ways to get on shows and stuff like that in this episode. I'm also gonna run you through like my experience on it, and that's pretty much it's gonna be a nice short fun episode. But basically how I got on it. So this was a very like weird part of my life, I guess, because I was like in college, and I was kind of at this point of like my business wasn't like thriving as much as it is now at the time, and I was kind of just taking anything I could get. Basically, one day I was on Facebook, and one of my friends in one of my classes at Columbia, she put up a post. I don't know if she listens to this or not, but shout out to Sam if she does listen. She put up a post one day, like I remember this, 6 a.m. and she goes, she worked for this company that was like in the city that worked on like different films, but she was like one of their like production people or something. But she was like, hey, we're like looking for a PA for this like food commercial, and just at 6 a.m. I was the first one to respond, and I cannot tell you how much I remember seeing someone respond at 6:01 a.m. after I responded at 6 a.m. within like 15 seconds of her posting. And I would have never worked on Shameless if it weren't for that, because it was like a first come first serve situation. So I responded to her, and she was nice enough to like point me over to the people she worked with. And oh my god, I had like just the weirdest like job that day. I was literally working on a film, like they were like it was a food shoot. So they got done with the dishes. I was the guy like cleaning the dishes, and like I was the guy like going to the store to like get like food that like looked a certain way for their shoot. Like I remember I distinctly remember being like looking at like oranges in a pile of oranges at the store, and they were like, get the orange that has like the most perfectly round shape, and like any defects, we can't have it. And I remember like analyzing the oranges at a store, and like just so many people were looking at me being like, you're actually insane. You've been at the oranges for 20 minutes. just pick an orange and leave. Because it's not like you're wearing a shirt or anything that says you're like on a film or anything. You know what I mean? You're just another Joe at a store buying oranges. So that's a really funny memory. But it was stuff like that, and I think this was a 1 day thing. Maybe it might have been 3 days. But I was like, I don't even know. I think I was just like a PA, and then they had me like grabbing like specific markers or something. I was literally doing the most random stuff like that and cleaning dishes, which was nothing I'd ever want to do ever. Oh my God. But I did it, and I think it was 3 days, because on the third day that I was working on that, I was still doing the same job that I just mentioned. And one day I like walked, there was like a second floor, and I don't know why that has any detail. I guess I'm just a detail-oriented person and telling stories. But anyway, I walked upstairs, and I remember this guy coming up to me. Like, he sounded so tired. He was like, "Hey, man, I got this job tomorrow, like cleaning out a truck on this show. And like, I don't know. I don't really feel like doing it. Would you by chance want to do it?" And like the way he said it, I know he was tired, but like, it just was like, it sounded like it was just the worst job. Like the way that he prefaced it. I'm like, who would want to wake up at 5 a.m. and clean out a semi truck? You know, you kind of got to do things you don't want to do to end up doing what you want to do. Which I have to give, like, I guess my mom a lot of credit for that, because that's something that she has always, like, believed in and always told me about, and I've always been like, no. But anyway, yeah, so I ended up saying yeah to that guy, and he was like, "Oh, thank you, man, appreciate it. Here's, like, this lady's number that does it, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, right on, man, right on. And I contacted this lady the next day. I was like, "Hey, I heard that, like, well, such and such doesn't want to, like, do this, but he sent me over to you." And she's like, "Oh yeah, blah, blah, blah." And so she brought me on over to this place called Chicago Film Studios, I think it was. And I was a PA, like, cleaning out a costume truck for a show that had just ended. Like, they were literally shooting a show to decide that there was something wrong with the budget, something wrong with, like, I don't know what, but it was literally an entire semi-truck just filled to the top with clothes and boxes and just stuff everywhere, because when it ended, they just threw shit in a truck and were like, clean it up and organize it and put it away and get it ready to send back to the people who they got the rentals from. And when you send stuff back with rentals, you always have to have it back in the way you got it and in the right order. So, oh my God, was that a mess. And I remember waking up at like, I live in the suburbs, so I was like an hour drive. So I remember waking up at like 3:30 that very next day after that gig, and like getting myself ready at 4 o'clock, heading out to the city, and just seeing that truck was like the bane of my existence. I was like, I do not want to do this, but I did. I ended up. It was like me, and there was like 1 or 2 other people, and I just remember like surfing through that frickin' truck. Like, there was like, oh shit, here's a jacket. All right, now find out which box this goes in. All right, now once it's in the box, make sure it has the right like barcode on it and blah, 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 blah. Like, just to reorganize one shirt was like 10 minutes. You know what I mean? And there was like 300 of them. And then on top of that, I had to like completely help reorganize like some shelves in there and like put stuff away. So on top of cleaning out a truck, we like had to organize the like inside of this studio area that they were using at one point. It was just like, and I've granted, like before this, I had worked at a golf course, so I was like kind of used to like manual labor in a way. But this was still early on, because like one thing I want to say is that if you're going to be doing this kind of stuff, you have to kind of like be focused in on this. And this has to be your thing, because this was a weird transition point in my life here, because it was like all of a sudden like 4 consecutive days of like doing PA work on films and like whatever, commercials, whatever. And I was so stuck on the idea of like filming skating. I was like looking up jobs, film skating, which they actually do exist. That is a thing, for those of you that don't know. But I was so stuck on like, am I going to be a skater filmer the rest of my life? Am I going to like what am I going to do? Am I going to find a 9 to 5? Like, I had no idea. This was like a weird transition point in my life. And one thing I have to say is, like, if this is what, I already said it already, but if this is what you want to do, you got to kind of like drop the stuff that's for fun. So for me, like, skating was fun, but I had to like really be like, all right, I have to kind of like put skating aside and make this be like the priority thing. And then if I have time, skate. And that was very hard for me to do. Like, and that applies to anyone else too. I don't know if like there's people that like, they have like their routine or whatever. Like, you wake up and you do this and this and that. Like, you have to kind of like retransition yourself and put that stuff aside to do this kind of thing, because it's very time consuming, which I'll get into that a little bit later on in this. But yeah, so that was very hard for me. And I say that to say that working that day, I think I worked 13 hours if I'm not mistaken, which at the golf course I had only worked 6 to 8 hour shifts. So the 13 hours was like insane for me. I was like, I literally felt like a friggin' like crumb after that day. I was just like, what? And I could like barely talk or anything. And I remember doing that, and then like the next day coming back there to like clean up some stuff for like 4 or 5 hours and kind of like get some stuff right in their like books, that we were like writing stuff in their books. And through doing all that, I was like talking to some people, and I'm like, all right, what do you guys do? And they're like, oh, we work on like this show, and like we work on this, blah, blah, blah. And then it wasn't until we like broke for lunch that I was speaking with the woman who I was working with on that show. And I was like, hey, so like, what do you do? Like, what are you working on? Cause she was like my like quote unquote boss. And she was like, oh, I work on the show called Shameless. And she's like, actually, we need like a PA if you want to do it. And I was like, I like froze. I was like, what? Like, Shameless? I was like, I almost didn't believe her. Like, you know when you hear something that sounds too good to be true and you're like, is this person pulling my leg? That was kind of the thought I had going. I thought she was going to be like, oh, no, I'm just kidding. Like, da-da-da-da-da. But no, she was serious. She was the woman who did costume production assistant on Shameless, which if you aren't like a film person, you're listening to this and that's confusing to you, that job, not her job, but like my job, is like very like, I don't want to say like bottom, but it kind of is. Like, if you go from like the camera person to my job, like if camera person is number 1 and the like very bottom of the barrel job you can have is like 78, that job is probably like 76, like straight up. Because you're just like a PA for the costume department. So you're not even like the person dressing the people. You're just kind of like doing costume things, which I'll get into that in a little bit. So again, wasn't really my field of things. I never saw myself as like a costume guy. I never saw myself as like a costume PA either. But I was like, hey, you know what? You got to do something to get something. Wow, Max, you're really on fire today. First, you're telling people to clean out their computer if they need space, and now you're telling people to do something if they're trying to do something. Awesome. But anyway, yeah, so I was kind of like under the pressure of that. I was like, sure, whatever. And then what do you know? A week later, walk in and I'm working on the show Shameless. And I was in this, I remember like I met like a few people in there and I was talking to these people and they're like, oh yeah, we work on like da 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 da. And I was just so quick to realize that like all these people that are working on this stuff, they're just being cycled through shows. Like they'll be on like Chicago PD one, they'll be on Shameless another, they'll be on Chicago Fire another. And that was where I realized like, okay, these people are just going through the same cycle that I just went through. And that's how this all works. Because it never made sense. Like I'd have friends before that would do that and they'd be like, yeah, dude, so like I'm on Shameless. And then like the next day they'd be like, oh yeah, dude, I'm working on like Batman. And I'm like, wait a minute. So you're telling me you know someone on that show than that? And I didn't realize that like once you're in this, they just keep cycling you to next shows as long as they like you. Just be nice. Just be a good person that gets stuff done and be nice and you'll get pushed onto other shows. It's just how it works. And sometimes even they run short of people at shows and they'll need you. But yeah, I quickly was doing that. And one thing that really struck me as soon as I was on that show, I was thinking like, okay, I'm moving up in the ranks of things because I went from like a food commercial to like some other weird show that didn't happen to working on Shameless, I was like, oh, that's a big deal, right? Like I'm moving forward, kind of, which I kind of was. But what I didn't understand was how I can move up and be like another position, like be like a camera PA or be like I don't know, just anything that's not costume. And that baffled me. So I was asking questions while I was working the show. But I worked my first day on that as a costume PA, and I realized the kind of work that it entailed. And it's kind of what I already said. It was just kind of like we had this big giant trailer car and a bunch of clothes hung up. And we just had to go through it and find like each of the actors in Shameless, and like make sure that like in this book we had there was like his shirt, his pants, his shorts, his tie, his like this belonging, and like make sure that lined up with what we were seeing on our sheet to check it off. All right, next one. Da 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 da. Mind you, there was like 400 pieces of clothes in there, but there was like a couple PAs. I think there was like 3 PAs or something like that. I don't remember. So we were just like sifting through all that, and then there were points in the day where we'd have to like go run stuff over to set, pass stuff off to people, and I guess I'll try to make a long story short, but through doing that, going back and forth through set, I remember the second day of me working on Shameless, this was so funny. Okay, keep in mind what I just told you, how I'm like, what, person number, if I could take a guess, like 76 out of 78. So it hits lunchtime, and all right, guys, break for lunch, and the trucks are over here, so I'm walking over to the truck, and I see some actors, and I see like some people that were in higher up positions than me standing there. So I like, just to be nice, I go and stand in the very back of the line because I'm like, oh, they're obviously ahead of me, right? And as I'm standing there, I'm just kind of looking around, and I see one of the drivers like point at me, and he's like, come here. And I was like, oh God, what did I do? And he's like, hop right in. And I was like, what? And the person that hopped in the truck right before me was Ford. Do you guys remember Ford from Shameless? If you don't, do a quick Google search without exiting out of this. But Ford was in that car, and I thought, why did they just put me in a car with Ford to go to lunch? And I completely forgot what him and I talked about. I think we were talking about like diet. I think we were talking about like our diets and like, I don't know, like fruits and vegetables or something. I think that was what we were talking about. I remember he brought up something with that, and that's why we ended up talking about that. I wasn't just like, so Ford, tell me about your diet. Imagine that. That's the first thing I say to him. Hey man, the show's really cool, but just tell me about your diet. Oh, that'd be so funny. No, but I was like, I'm like, dude, I'm like the new guy in the block, and I get put in the car with Ford. But anyway, we went to lunch, and it was cool. I got to meet him, and I shortly realized that like working on that show is different than a lot of shows. Like a lot of shows, like the actors are very like, ooh, they're the actors. Like, don't say hi to them. Like, leave them over there. Let them do their thing. I shouldn't say a good amount are. There's a good amount of other shows that you can, like, talk to the actors. But I shortly realized this when I think William H. Macy came by our area and said hi to all of us one day. And then, like, that next day on set, I think I was, like, I had, like, a set of, like, lips clothes in my hand. And I was taking them, like, to him. And I like handed him the clothes, and he was like, brought up something, and then I like looked back at him, and I was like, oh dude, like I was like, you're drinking that Dunkin' like dark coffee or whatever, because he was drinking a thing of black coffee, and so I was like, oh, black coffee, interesting choice, or something along those lines, and he said something back, and I realized that like these guys are just like super casual and like down to talk to you. They're not really like told anything to be like, don't talk to the PAs. And I think like within a few hours later, Ian in the show came walking. Why am I drawing a blank at his name right now? But anyway, he came walking into our trailer and was like chatting with us. And I was like, okay, these people they're just around, you know? They're just coming to say hi, and they're like regular people, just like everyone else. They're not like, given restrictions. So that I thought was really cool. And it made me feel more like, I guess, attached to it. And and more like welcomed, especially working on a show like that. I would like not feel welcomed if they didn't, because I'd be like, oh, I'm just like a guy doing the bitch work just to be here and get paid like whatever. And I don't, this is something else I want to talk about too, is how much they pay you, because I think at the time I was getting paid between like 9 to 11 an hour or something like that. I don't know. It was just like regular average pay. So it wasn't like anything special, because I remember like walking away with like between like 150 and 170, I think, a day. I don't know. It was hardly anything. And so that's why I kind of felt this urge to like keep working, because I was like, oh, if I keep working, by the time of weekends, I'll have this amount of money. And so that was one thing that kind of kept me hanging. Another thing that really kept me hanging while working on this show was what I was saying earlier, is like the people, but also like the idea that you could be working while you're working on this show. A common thing that goes around is hearing people talk about them being in the union. So the woman that was my boss in that show was in the union, and there was another woman working on it who told me she's in the union. And that's all you hear about while you're working the show, is like, oh, one day you'll be in the union if you work and da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's such a mystery. It's just the biggest mystery, because I remember talking to people that like were like, oh no, I'm not in the union. And then like I worked in that show for 4 years. So I remember like a year or two later, like talking to someone that was like, oh yeah, I'm in the union now. And I'm like, wait, so after a year you got in, but I didn't? I'm like, explain how this works. And when I said that, someone was like, oh, it's like the amount of hours you put in. And then I talked to someone else about this, and they said, oh no, it's someone else. It's based on like who you know. And then I talked to someone else that said that there's like certain people that can put you in the union based on da 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 da. And I was like, what's the answer here? And I'm sure there might be some people that are like into film listening to this that are going to correct me and be like, dude, obviously if you do this, this is how you get in the union. Duh. Like, I'm sure there's going to be some people like that. But nonetheless, that kept me hanging, because I was like, well, if I keep working, I'll be in the union. And what do you know? I worked in a show for 4 years and I never got in the union. And did I work hard every single day? Yes. Did people like what I did? Yes. So I don't know what I did wrong to not get in the union. I don't know. It's a mystery, but I still to this day will like think about it. But I'm kind of glad that I'm not in the union on films, honestly, because there was like a running joke on set, and they had like memes around on like offices on set where like people's door would be like people in the union, and then it'd be like regular people, and it would show like this sign of like someone that was like bloodshot eyes just like sitting there, and it'd show another one of like a regular person just going about their day. So I'm kind of glad that I didn't get in the union, because I feel like those people just get so burnt out. I can only imagine how burnt out they get, because just my short-lived like 4 or 5 years of working in film, I felt more burnt out than I ever had my whole life. And for like that pay as a costume PA, so weird. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about more what I was doing as a costume PA, so that like you can understand what that job is if anyone sees that and is like, oh, what do you do? It's really, and I don't know why, every time I film a podcast, I get so itchy. I'm never itchy until I film a podcast. And I'll look at my nose at the end of every episode. My nose is just brighter red than anything else in my face. I don't know what is up with podcasting getting itchy. Welcome, guys. This is the Itchy Podcast, where we talk about how itchy we are. But anyway, I would just on that show be like doing clothes stuff, and like it'd be things like organizing clothes, running clothes back and forth to stores, or like looking at clothes codes of stuff they needed in next episodes and being like, oh shit, this is the wrong one, because they like someone who previously did the job wrong, marked it wrong. So I'd have to go find the right like shirt for someone. Be like, oh shoot, like the Macy's has this tag number, so I got to look at this tag number and go to Macy's and be that guy in Macy's in aisle frickin' 14 with the sport coats for 20 minutes while I look for this code. So I'd do that, or they'd be like, hey, we need you to go like pick up this costume from like this rental place. Can you go talk to the guy in there and tell the guy this and blah 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 blah. So it's just like random stuff like that. And there were times I think I got really anxious working on the show because just how I am, I like kind of doing things. It like feels guilty when I'm like sitting there not doing something. The same way I feel guilt when I'm like on a shoot, like waiting for a shoot to happen or like waiting for something to happen. I'm just like sitting there. It's just this overhanging guilt that I feel naturally. And I felt that working a lot on Shameless because they'd be like, all right, so between like these takes, we don't need anything. So you can just go to set. And I'm like, what do you mean go to set? And they're like, oh, you can just go there and watch. So I literally go to set and just stand there and like watch. And I had nothing to do but watch, which I'm not complaining about. It was great. It was nice to sit there and watch. But it just felt weird that like I would spend like 2 or 3 hours at a time just sitting there, not doing anything. And I guess that's like, to a lot of people, they probably look at that differently. They're probably like, dude, you're getting paid to sit there. Like, just enjoy it, man. And like, yeah, you're right, for sure. But I kind of, like I said, I get anxious. So I kind of like if they're like, go to set, but like every take, we need you to like go run this over to da 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 da. Then I'd be like, all right, cool. And I'd like feel like I'm contributing to the show. But it just felt like I was like no longer a contribution to the show, I guess. But who knows? Hey, you know what? Everyone's different. Maybe that's just based on my personality. And why am I holding this water bottle? I don't know. Let me take a sip of it. But anyway, that was kind of my long story short of what I did on that show. And it turned into me like meeting other people. It kind of turned into me meeting other people. And I have one friend that I worked on it with, who's now like a pretty good friend of mine. Shout out to Ryan. Shout out to him if he's listening to this. But he kind of like was kind of my support throughout that show. And I should put up this photo. I have a photo of me and Carl in the show. Before I get into how I got into other shows, I do want to say I did end up meeting Carl and becoming like, I don't want to say like good friends, but I became a good enough friend with him to the point where like him and I would see each other while we were working, be like, hey, what's up, dude? And like, it turns out him and I know like a handful of the same people. And we were like, just like super cool with each other by the time like season 10, I think was the last one we worked on was over. So that was really cool. We took like a bus ride to set together one time and just chatted for like 30 minutes on life and stuff like that. He's super, super down to earth guy. Like I'd freaking love to hang out with that dude. So it was really cool to see that. I guess that's probably a common question. Being like, who did you meet? So yeah, I also sat down and had lunch with him one day. I got to meet William H. Macy one day. It was like one of the last days in the show. As he was leaving to California, he like literally came up to me and was like, hey, I'm taking off to California. Nice working with you. And I was like, oh, sweet. He didn't have to come up to me. He just kind of went out of his own way to do that. So that was very nice and felt kind of heartwarming. Also, Liam Gallagher became like his name is Christian in real life. He became like one of my like good friends on set. That sounds funny to say, but like I was eating lunch with him basically like every day during a set, which is fun. I say to say that like everyone was just very casual on set. No one was like kind of staying away from you. So I sat down lunch with him like just about every day because I had people that I worked with that I was close with, but it was like the timing of when we ate was always so different because we had like your lunch group A and your lunch group green A, B, or whatever the heck their labels were. So I didn't get to eat lunch when the people I was close with were eating lunch. So I was like, well, who do I eat lunch with? So he was there. So I would eat lunch with him. He was in the same like freaking group that I was, I guess. And I talked to his mom, and he is so funny. One of the first things he said to me, I was wearing a hat, and like some shirt one day, and he's like, "Oh, dude, I like your beanie," and dude, that's a cool shirt. Like blah blah blah. I forget what shirt I was wearing, but I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, I didn't expect that. And then him and I just kind of like, when you become like good friends with someone, you end up just kind of giving each other shit just because it's funny. Kind of how it was with him and I. We'd see each other and be like, "Oh, dude," and like say some funny shit and laugh at each other. So that was really cool. That'll always kind of stick with me. I'm trying to think who else. No, I did like exchange one conversation with Cameron Monaghan, who is Ian. It was something about a shirt he was wearing though. It wasn't like anything too much of anything. He was just like, "Oh, hey, I'm coming in here for like this shirt. Did you see where like da 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 put the shirt?" And I was like, "No, I didn't see, but maybe you could like go talk to her, blah blah blah." And that was it. But yeah, I think that was a really cool part for me. But anyway, through working on that show, and anyway, if anyone has any other questions, leave them in the comments. Let me know. Maybe I'll make a part 2 to this if it's necessary. I'll give some advice towards the end, but yeah, basically what I was trying to say is I became close enough friends with this dude Ryan, who was just so kind enough to be like, "Hey man, like if you're trying to work on this show, I got this group of people. You're more than welcome to like join this group, and we can like recommend other gigs to you." And so thank you for him being there, because he got me on like a bunch of other shows. We ended up working together on a handful of other stuff, and we now share like a ton of inside jokes about stupid shit that happened on set, and we always catch up and stuff. So it's nice to kind of build some good friends through that, but I'm also glad in the same coin that I decided to go a different direction and not work in the film industry, because it's such a daunting thing. I think that's the right word for it. And the hours, that's one thing I want to sweat. The hours you work are like literally like they could tell you, "We need you here at 3 a.m. It's like so random. They'll be like, "We need you here at 3 a.m. tomorrow and be working till this time." And you're like, you like look at your thing, and you're like, "Okay, 14, and you're like 16 hours. But it hits like an overtime pay after like 10 hours, I think it is. But it's like barely any as a PA, I should say. So it is all kind of like networking and everything like that. But yeah, it's just crazy how that all works. So you could be like working one day that's also like a 10-hour day, or like some prep days for the shows where you like prep a week before the show is happening. Those days can be shorter, but while the show is happening, you have like long shifts, and it's so freaking tiring, man. It's so tiring. So if this is something you're thinking about, like, please consider like that first and consider if it's worth it. I mean, everyone's path is different, man. Like I said, some people can go from PA to freaking whatever the heck they want the next week. I don't know how that works. It's so weird. I don't get it. I don't get it, but maybe you will work on it and get it. But I don't. So work and see what happens. Work and see what happens. That's what they say. Yeah, so that's kind of a bizarre thing, but also too, like, just be nice to people around you. Talk to everybody. See who does what. I think someone on Shameless was like, "Hey, there's this like German soccer commercial coming into town. We need like a PA on it." And I was like, "Cool, whatever." And I gave the person my name, and I woke up to an email like after that season, this particular season of Shameless was over. It was like a few weeks after it, and I woke up to an email one day from this person who responded, and it was a soccer commercial coming down that needed a camera PA. So I got a text one day. That was like my favorite PA job of anything I've ever done. I was like a camera PA one day, helping out like the camera crew, like move stuff around, help them, like, I don't know, it was like raining, so I ran like a cover to the camera, like there was like just stuff that was like that like camera needed while they were working. And it was cool to be a part of like someone that was like going back and forth with the camera crew. And I remember like coming home that day being like, "Oh man, I wish that was going on longer." Like, this is like a job I would like intend on having to be able to like go somewhere with. You know what I mean? Like working in camera department, then you could be an AC, then you could be a this, and I feel like that's easier to go higher up in rather than sticking 4 years out in the costume department. I feel like I know more about like barcodes and costumes than an average person should, you know? My mom the other day was like sorting out clothes, trying to return something. I was like, Mom, just look at the barcode. Just look at the barcode number. And it matched up to the receipt. She was like, what? I'm like, yeah. That's how you know if you have the right. It's like, that's how you know if you have the right thing. So I know a lot about that stuff, which is funny. But you kind of end up learning like weird things out of it. I guess. I don't know if that's advice or not, but it's kind of something you can take away from it. Get as much sleep as you can is another piece of advice. That's something I didn't do because I was, like I said, I was very anxious. So it'd be like I'd like get home at like freaking 9, 10 at night or something, and I'd like make myself a dinner. Even though there was food on set, I would still always make myself like a nice homemade dinner after it. I don't know, I guess that's just like taking care of yourself. And then I'd like go in my room and I'd be like, go to sleep. But I was like anxious for the next day already. So I'd have a hard time sleeping. So that was like a weird thing because I'd go to work a 16-hour day on like a 4-hour, like after 4 hours of sleeping. And I'm just like, dude, like chugging coffee all damn day just to stay awake. So that was like very, very weird. I'm trying to think about any advice for like getting on to shows. There's Facebook groups out there called like Chicago Production Assistants. You can just join those groups and then tell people you're up to be a PA and quickly hop on a show. Because once you're in the cycle of working on a show and you're a good person, they like you, the chances of like, and as long as you talk, I cannot stress that enough. It drives me insane. The people that like will go do something, but they'll be like just so quiet. Like, I understand if you're an introvert, but like if you want to do this, you have to talk to people. That's not a non-negotiable. It's not like a negotiable thing here. That's a non-negotiable. You have to talk to people, and they'll be like, "Oh shit, I remember working with da 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 da," or like maybe they're too damn tired. You know, maybe they need you to fill in for them, and there you go. So please talk to people while you're on there. Even if you're an introvert, please do your best. Just 3-4 people. Just talk to some people and ask them what they do. And they'll likely tell you, and they'll remember you. And that's kind of how you finesse this whole thing. And don't be like that weird guy or weird girl or whatever that's like kind of just there to like monitor other people or whatever. Like, actually be friends with these people and like talk to them too, so you're not just like the guy that's mooching off of them. Yeah, that's some really solid advice actually. Do that, because that's how you end up working on like, I think I worked on like Batman one day after that. Oh, that was another weird thing. You have to look out for yourself while you're on these shows. I learned that the frickin' hard way, man. There was some show after Shameless wrapped. Some show knew that Shameless wrapped, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna be working in the studio next to you, but we need like PAs. Can we grab some people from your show or whatever?" And I remember getting this like call after I had worked like 14 hours or 15 hours on Shameless, and they're like, "Hey, we need you over at our show now." Like da 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 da, and I'm like on the phone after 16 hours work. I'm like, I don't know. Like, we'll see if I can do that. I don't know. Like, literally dead. And they're asking me to work on another show. And I'm like, yo, straight up, these people do not care. Hey, oh, you work 16 hours? Don't care. Hey, come work 24. How about that? Come work 24 hours, because that's just so normal. You know? Like, I feel like when you hear of someone working 12 hours, you're like, what? And I think I worked 16 hours because it was like wrap day. That's always like the most like time consuming day, because they have to like wrap, and that takes longer. Because everything is coming in. Like, you have to get the boxes and everything out in the truck, and you have to like load a bunch of boxes in a truck and get that shit on the road. Like, So it's like your regular job plus that. So it's like a longer day. And I just remember like all the manual labor adding up and me being like, oh my God. So please look out for yourself if you do go down this path, and be mindful of that. And if someone asks you to work hours that you feel are unnecessary, then yeah, for sure. Tell them that you need to like sleep or whatever. But if you work 4 hours on one show and then someone needs you for 6 hours on another, fucking do the 6-hour one too. Work 10 hours, work 12 hours. And if you need to work 16, do it. But don't work 24. Don't do it. And I know I'm not the only one saying this because I've talked to people that have like experienced this too. So I know I'm not talking out of my ass. Like I've heard of other people that have been asked to work this amount of time. That's that. That is that. I think I'm going to wrap it up there because that is all I think I can talk about. And hopefully that helps people that are looking to do PA stuff, or maybe it doesn't help people. Maybe it's cool to hear my experience on it at least. And I'm excited to finally like make this video because I've been thinking about it for a long time. I didn't know what to do with this story. I told a few people this just recently and they were like, what? So I was like, all right, this is worth a podcast. So that's what I'm doing. And hopefully you guys continue to have a good day. Thanks for listening. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. Even if you're not new here, frickin' let me know what you thought in the comments. Leave a comment, okay? Not many people leaving comments. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And talk to you later. Bye.